Boker Tov. Today's daf is Daf Yud Dalet and Shavuos, as we learn for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael and Sun Masar V'Shivya. Later on, we'll come back to a point from yesterday. Let's start the new parak, the parak Sheni, the second parak in Shavuos from the Mishnah. Yedias Atumah Shtaim Shein Arba. This is a repetition of what we saw in the first Mishnah, the first parak. In both these parakim, I think just like in the first parak, the first Mishnah is like all bunched together. In other words, the Mishnah that we're going to learn now really covers the whole parak. So Yedias Atumah Shtaim Shein Arba. What are the awarenesses of Tumah? 2, which is 4, meaning 2 are beferish in the Torah, and 2 we learn out. What are they? Nitma v'yada. He became tamei, touched a sheretz or a dead body, a dead sheretz or a dead body, a dead human body. He became tamei v'yada, and he knew about it. V'nelma mimenu. Then he forgot. He had what we call a spell of unawareness. V'nelma mimenu. He forgot about the tumah. V'zachar zakodesh. He knew that this meat was kosher meat, but he thought he wasn't tamei. He could eat it, and then he ate it, and then he found out about it afterwards. Okay, that's one case. He knew he was tamei. He ate some. He knew he was tamei. We're going with Rashi's interpretation here. Tosa says you could learn. We'll see in a base that you have to know that he was tamei. He had to know the halachas of tumah. But the pashut pshat, like Rashi learns, is that he knew he was tamei, and he remembered he was tamei, but he forgot. He didn't know that this meat was kosher. So that's the first. The first one was he forgot that he was tamei. He knew it was kaddish, but he thought he was tar. Zocher kaddish. Now in man kaddish, or he thought that he didn't know that this meat was kosher meat. He thought it was just regular steak. He knew he was tamei, but he thought he was allowed to eat regular steak. So those are the first 2. The next case is just brought down if he forgot both, which is even stronger, but it's not really listed. It's not one of the 4. He didn't know that he was tamei, and he didn't know that it was a kosher mibachos hakodesh, v'lo yada, and he didn't know. And afterwards he found out about that. All those cases are reiseh ba'ola v'yoreh. That's when you're chayav a carbon. Meaning he didn't know. He knew he was tamei, forgot that he was tamei, and he knew that the meat was holy, but he thought it was tar. He didn't think he was tamei, and he ate it. And then afterwards he remembered. Chayv's bring carbon of that. Or if he knew he was tamei, he remembered he was tamei, but he thought that this meat was not kosher meat. Then we have, those are the first 2. Then we have nitma v'yada v'nel mimenu tumah. Again, he became tamei. He knew he was tamei, and he forgot. V'zachas hamigdash, and he knew this is the base of Mikdash, but he forgot that he was tamei, and he went into the base of Mikdash. Or nel man Mikdash, he didn't know that this was the base of Mikdash. He forgot the place. Like today, when we don't really have the base of Mikdash, forgot exactly where it is. Nel man Mikdash. V'zachas, he remembered the tumah. So those are the 2 cases that nitma v'yada and tumah, forgot that he was somebody remembered the mikdash, or now mikdash, he didn't know this base mikdash was tumah. So those are your 4 cases. Meaning he forgot he was tamei and he ate kachim, or he knew he was tamei, he forgot that this was kachim, or he forgot that he was tamei and he went into the base of mikdash, or he remembered he was tamei, but he forgot that this was the base of mikdash. Or now or that's like Yagdal Tor v'Yada, just extra. Let's say he forgot both, and afterwards he found out Yada, he remembered. So this is really a repetition of what we learned in the first Mishnah in the Masechet, but he expands on it to explain to you each case in detail. Before we learned it in Rashi, and the Gemara explained what it was, but now we're telling you the Mishnah itself says what these cases are. So those are your 4. The Gemara is going to ask, can you really, the lashon of Yedias Atumah sounds like knowing that you're tamei, right? You knew something. You knew the base of Mikdash. We've explained it that you forgot in all. If you look at the 4 cases, you forgot 4 times. You forgot this. You forgot that. But knowledge is you had to know before and know after. So really, you can count them as 6 or as 8. The Gemara will talk about that. Now, when you went into the base of Mikdash while you were tamei, we said that whether you went in, right, you forgot you were tamei. Let's say. And you went into the base of Mikdash. Where in the base of Mikdash are you chayiv? Whether you went into the Azara, as we know its dimensions. We'll see that you could add on the king with the Navi and the Urim V'Tumim, the Kohen Gadol, and the Sanhedrin can decide to expand the Azara. So he says whether you went into the Azara the way it always was, or whether you went in after they expanded it. Don't forget the Azara in the Mishkan is not the same as the Azara in the base of Mikdash. Even the 2 base of Mikdash weren't exactly the same dimensions. You don't add on to Shalim Ba'al Azaros Ella To add on to the city of Yerushalayim, to expand the city or expand the Beis Hamikdash, you have to have all four components: the king, the Navi, which at the time of Moshe he was both. Urim v'Tumim was with the Kohen Gadol, his brother Aaron HaKohen, and Sanhedrin Shel Shem Echad, which accompanied Moshe, or some say that Moshe himself was the equivalent of the Sanhedrin. And when they did this, they had a whole procession. These four components all agreed on the expansion of the city or of the Azara in the Beis Mikdash, and they had a procession, Ushtei Todos, and they had two loaves of carbon toda that accompanied them. It was Shiur. They had a band singing. The Kohanim were the Levim were singing. Ubezin Mahalchen, and Bezin also went with them. Vishteis Todos Achrein, the Bezin preceded them, and the two Lachmei Toda followed them. V'chol Yisrael, and after them. In other words, they had a big fancy celebration when they added on to the Azara or to Yerushalayim, but you had to have all those four, or it wasn't. Otherwise, it wouldn't be official. So today, even though we're remote, we've all that part of Yerushalayim, we're not in Yerushalayim proper with the dimensions that they had in those days.
Is banking different than Sanhedrin here?
Pardon? Yes. No, the Bezdin is the Sanhedrin. Yeah, Bezdin is the Sanhedrin. Just saying that that's the order. When they followed, that it had with their agreement, and how did they do? Bezdin, Shiv Torah. But he says Bezdin went first, then the Shtei Torah Sacharein, Chol Yisrael Acharein. Presumably, whoever the Ab Bezdin was, went for, and the king. Where's the king and the Navi? Presumably the king and the Navi preceded them, and the Kohen Gadol, and then the Bezdin followed by the two loaves of bread. On Amid Beis now, Pnimis Nechelis, the inner loaf was eaten. V'achitzonos refes. This is all Chorah Drabanan. I mean, it's not really listed in the Torah. The Torah doesn't say this specifically. So this is learned out. And the outer one was burnt. What do you mean by inner one, outer one? The Gemara will talk about that. If it wasn't done with all these four components and the celebration, in other words, if you went into an area of the Azara, which is outside the Azara proper, and they added on to include it in the Azara, but it wasn't done properly in this manner, then you're not chayiv for entering into the Beis Hamikdash, into the Azara without permission. Just a point on before we continue on with the Mishnah. Point on yesterday, at the end of yesterday's daf, you were asking about how do we say that the Kohanim did not contribute to the par? Remember how did the par? How did Israel contribute? So we were discussing, did it come from the Trumas HaLishcha, the regular thing they've already contributed to? So I said maybe the Kohanim didn't contribute to the Chatzi Shekel. And you said maybe they did. Of course, it is a machlokas. So Tosas brings it down here. Tosas Divri Maskul Delo on Yudal and Aleph. In the middle of the Tosas says, the Kohanim are not included in the Shkolim. That's Shita. The halacha, I think that all Bnei Yisrael did. The halacha was that everybody Yisrael contributed the Chatzi Shekel to the Trumas HaLishcha, from which that was the public funds, the public treasury from which they brought karbanos. That's the halacha. But there's a Shita that the Kohanim didn't contribute, so therefore you could say the Kohanim didn't pay for anything here. The body lost something to do. Elafilu, Tosas goes, Elafilu mandomer shematzuvim lishkol, that they are required to give the Chatzi Shekel. Right, the sor for the Bnei Yisrael, the sor nasim afnim, which atoned for Bnei Yisrael, or suspended any time that they went into the Beis Mikdash while they were tamei, but they knew before, but they forgot afterwards. It suspends that. That came from Mikol Makom im Chosros. Let's say they ran out of money. You ever have that? This was the famous historic precedent for all Jewish organizations being in debt. They had no money. They all ran out of money. So right, the government and they came to collect a special appeal. There's no money left in the kitty, right? Ain't government, we didn't collect from them. Even if you say that the Kohanim did normally contribute to the Trumas HaLishcha, but if they ran out of money and they had to make another appeal and they went after the Bnei Yisrael, everybody had to contribute, they didn't go after the Kohanim in this case, so therefore they didn't contribute to this soyer. Or let's say somebody just donated, the Friedmans donated the whole carbon. There was no money left, so they wanted, of course, their name on a plaque and all that. So they they contributed this sar, v'zika sar letzibur kosher af bishlo zachim. So the Kohanim apparently did not actually contribute to the sa'ir, even though technically, if they did contribute and there was money in Trumas Lishka, so they had some share in it too, but they weren't required to contribute to it. That's the idea. They weren't required to contribute to it. So that's the idea. That's what we mean over here, that the Kohen didn't contribute. So you might think the Gemara said that they shouldn't have any kapara. They're not part of this Bnei Yisrael, and the power of the coin, he buys that himself, the coin gadol. So they didn't contribute to the power. Question is, did they contribute to the soil? So we say maybe they shouldn't get, they just like they don't get atoned for. The covenant was, since they don't get atoned for by the soil because they didn't contribute to it, even though you're right, technically, in theory, they could have contributed to it if they gave the Chasi Shekel and you came from there and the money came from Lishcha, they give, but they're not required to if there was a special appeal, or you can say like the Shita that the Kohanim didn't contribute at all. Didn't have to contribute to the Lishcha. Anyway, for any of those reasons, we would have thought that maybe the Kohanim didn't have a share in this kapara because it wasn't for them, not the Sar and not the Par. The answer is we said that all of Beis Aaron, Chiper Bado, Vad Beso, all the Kohanim are part of Beis Aaron, not just his immediate family. So going on with the Mishnah on Yud Dalam Beis on the third line, Nidma Bazar. Let's say, listen carefully now. Let's say he became Tomei in the Azar itself. Something that became Tomei in the Azar. How can you become Tomei in the Azar itself? Let's say somebody died on him right there, whatever. He was in the Azara, a guy died, he became tummy, he was in the OL with the tummy. What do you do? Then he forgot. He forgot that he was tummy. He remembered the mikdash. What are you supposed to do? Or mikdash, or he forgot that he was in the base of mikdash. Or it's the same idea, but here he was tummy. He didn't go into the base of mikdash tummy, but he became tummy there. And either he forgot he was tummy, or he forgot this base of mikdash, or he forgot both, right? So the halach is, what do you do in a case that you have to leave immediately? Oh, shisha b'chtei ashtachava. I skipped the word. And he bowed down. Now let's say he became tamei while he was in the base of Mikdash. What should he do? So it says v'shach, he's got to run out right away. If he ran out with the shortest way out, and he ran out immediately, then he's not chayiv anything. Because it was an ones, right? He didn't do anything. He had to get out. So his job is to run out right away. If he did that, he's not. But let's say he bowed down in the base of Mikdash. He took the time to bow down. He forgot that he was tamei, or he forgot that it was base of Mikdash. Hard to forget if he was in the base of Mikdash, if he was bowing down. Why was he bowing down? But he bowed down, and then he remembered. Or even if he didn't bow down, or he waited in there long enough. In other words, he had a job, run out immediately. Sometimes you have a job. This happened, get out. You get out right away. Or he waited long enough to bow down. Bala Baruch, or he took the long way out, right? His job was, he's in the base of Mikdash, became Tameh, run out, the shortest way, take the first exit out. And he took the long way out, Chayiv. Then he's Chayiv for Tumas Mikdash B'Kodshav. He's Chayiv being Tameh base Mikdash. But if he took the short way out, the shortest way out, then he's Potter. Zui mitzvah say Mikdash. Listen carefully. There's a mitzvah say bishalchu min hamachane, right? And then it says, well, to Talmud, don't be Matami the Mikdash. This is a mitzvah say Mikdash ain't chayiv and aleh, that you're not chayiv for it. What do we mean ain't chayiv aleh? These few words are really from Horios, from Masechtas Horios, which we're going to learn the last Masech in Nezikin that we're going to come to in a few months. That you're not chayiv. What do you mean not chayiv? You're not chayiv the par helam davar shel tzibur. What do we mean by that? Par helam davar shel tzibur is a par that the tzibur brings when Bezdin paskin wrong about something, and most of the Jews followed it, and then they found out that they were wrong, right? So the individual Jews don't bring a carbon, but Bezdin has to bring a carbon. It's called the par helam davar shel tzibur, which is totally burnt. The whole parsha about that. We say it also Ezo Makomen every day. We say that at Param Davar Shel Tzibur. And that's what so Bezdin brings the param davar, which is called it's a chatos that they bring for leading the people in the wrong direction, but they don't bring a param davar in this case. Why? Because what's the mitzvah? What was the avera that was done there? Tumas mikdash v'kotchev. What's the normal punishment for tumas mikdash v'kotchev? Carbon ola b'yorei. When is there a par helam davar shel tzibur? When Bezdin paskin wrong for something which you have a regular chatos kavua. Not a carbon of the right, but the punishment for which, if an individual is chayav kares And if he did a b'shogeg, be chayev a carbon kavua. This is not a carbon kavua. Therefore, the Mishnah says, Zui mitzvah say shebemikdash she'ein chayev aleh. We don't mean chayev aleh she'ein. It doesn't say chayev aleh as an individual. We just said that if you went out with the short way out, you're putter. But if Bezin paskin that you don't have to run out right away, or that you could take the long way out. So what do? You're chayev there. An individual would be chayev. But Bezin, if they paskin wrong and most of the tzibur followed them, they wouldn't be chayev. There would be no para moldava shel tzibur. Presumably, each person would have to bring his own carbon, right? The carbon olav yored if he found out about it afterwards. But that's not a case of carbon olav of para moldava shel tzibur. Why? Because you're not chayev an individual is not chayev a carbon kavua for that a chatos kavua, but he's chayev only carbon olav yored. Then this is really just the continuation of the Mishnah in Horios. Ve'ezuhi mitzvah say shebenita. Where do you have a mitzvah say that you are chayiv, that there is para moldava shel tzibur? Where do you have that? Ve'ezuhi mitzvah say shebenita shechayavin aleh, that the bezin would have to bring a para moldava shel tzibur if they paskin wrong about that, even though it's a mitzvah say, but it's an asay and a lo sasay, meaning that hayim mishamish imator. Let's say a man was in middle of bia with his wife, and everything was fine. She says, I just felt blood coming out. I just felt my period. Now he's already there. What do you do? The halacha is he has to wait, be still. The sounds, we're getting very technical here. Sounds he's supposed to wait and still until his erection dies out, until it abates, and then pull out. Why? Because if he pulls out while he has an erection, he's still having pleasure. That's part of the pleasure of bia, in and out, right? So the Torah covers everything, right? She says, I just felt it. Upirish miyad, and he left right away while he still had an erection. Chayav. She also hanalo could be also because his leaving is the same as going in, meaning he's having pleasure as the friction is giving him pleasure. That's what you're supposed to do. So if Besin, so what are we talking about here? We're not talking about as an individual. Yeah, that's what he's supposed to do. Meaning, if he didn't know, he made a mistake and he didn't know. Okay, he has to bring a chatos. If he followed the instructions and he stayed still until he lost the erection, then he did the right thing. If Bezdin paskined wrong and told everybody that they're allowed to pull out right away without waiting, and most of the tzibur followed that, it's almost an impossible situation where you could say that both of the tzibur did that, but there would be there would be a parahol davar tzibur. Why? Because the regular punishment for sleeping with a nida is kares, or in the case of shogeg would be a carbon chatos kavua. So there would be a parahol davar tzibur in that far out case. However, it's only brought down because the first part was brought from the Mishnah in Horios, and then we mentioned the last part also. Back to us. We have said that when you chayav carbon olav yorei, in the case of tumas mitzvah kochav, you knew at the beginning, you knew at the end, and you forgot in the middle, right? Yediyah b'tchila v'yediyah b'sof. If there was only a yediyah at the end, then the seir hapnimi is mechaper for you. If there was no yediyah at the beginning, no yediyah at the end, then it's Rosh Chodesh's carbon then the carbon of Shalosh Regalim is mechaper for you. If you were tar and you ate kachim, which was tamei, you were tar, you ate kachim, which was tamei, then it's the serve Rosh Chodesh. But we're assuming here that you have a yediyah at the beginning, at the end. Not everybody agrees now. Rabbi Lezer Omer, hasheretz v'nel, and let's say you touched a dead sheretz, one of the 8 shrotzim that are metamei a person, v'nel mimenu, and you forgot about it. Al helam sheretz chayiv and chayiv al helam mikdash. You're only chayiv you're only chayiv carbon olav yorei if you forgot you were tamei. Not like the other case. We said shnaim shein arbor. You knew you were tamei, but you forgot this was the base of mikdash. You forgot this was kosher. No, you only chayiv if you forgot that you were tamei, and then you remembered afterwards, right? Rabbi Kiva Omer, similar to Rabbi Lezer, v'nel mimenu, you forgot who tamei. It says v'nel mimenu who tamei. Those are the words of the pasuk. Al helam tumah chayiv. Only chayiv if you forgot about the tumah. And chayiv al helam mikdash and chayiv that. Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Kiva almost say the same thing, but Rabbi Lezer will see his makbid on sheretz. In other words, you had to know what was matamayu. According to Rabbi Kiva, it's mashma as long as you knew you were tamei, even though you didn't know that what was matamayu. Rabbi Shmuel Omer, Rabbi Shmuel seems to say, like the Tanakama, like we've learned, v'nelam shteit pamim v'chayiv al helam tumah v'al helam gesh chayiv al helam tumah al helam mikdash, seems to say like the Tanakama, but the Gemara will explain that Rabbi Shmuel does also not like the Tanakama. He says you don't have to have yediyah at the beginning. He says it's like any other carbon chatos. You didn't know chas v'chayla, a man slept with his sister. He thought it was his wife, and they were in the same bed, and he slept with his sister. He didn't know at the beginning that that it was his sister. He didn't know. He just found out at the end. Or you didn't know that this was chaylev. You thought it was just a piece of fatty steak, and you ate that. You didn't know anything at the beginning. There you're chayv kares. Rav Shmuel says the same thing over here. You only had to know at the end. You didn't have to have a yediyah at the beginning. So Rav Shmuel argues with the Tanakama, as does Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Kiva. Amar Papa. Amar Papa Labaya, Shtaim Shein Arba, he said in the Mishnah, 2, which is 4, Shtaim Shein Sheishavin is really 6. Why? Because we're talking about the word yedios. You didn't say helamos. Helamos means a spell of unawareness. Yedios means you knew. So even in the first case, you knew you were tummy, you forgot, you went into and you ate kachim. And then you knew afterwards. So how many yedios are there? Those are 2 right there. You knew at the beginning, you knew at the end. So if you're counting yedios, it should be 6. Yedias atoma tchila v'sof, you knew at the beginning and the end. Yedias hakodesh tchila, you knew that it was kodesh beginning and the end. Yedias mikdash tchila v'sof, that's 6. The Gemara tamech. So Abaye retorted to Papa, Timim, you could really count 8. Da'ika tumas the kodesh v'tuma the mikdash. You knew that you were tameh before and afterwards when it comes to eating kachim, and you knew that you were tameh before and tameh afterwards when it comes to entering the base of mikdash. So you can count yedias atuma also, not as 2 as 4. So then you have, so if you have yedias of tuma of kodesh and yedias of tuma of mikdash, both beginning and end, and then you have yedias of the kach that it was kachim beginning and end, yedias of mikdash beginning and end. So you really have 8. This is halokasha. Shame tuma achasi, but it just means that you knew you were tummy, whether the thing you did afterwards was eating kachim or going to the base of mikdash. It was the idea of tumah at the beginning, at the end. But the fact is, there's still 6. Amar Papa says no. Lolam tameh. I agree with you. There are really 8. You can count them as 8. But Arba Kamaisa, the 4 that you knew at the beginning. I knew before that I was tumah. I knew before that I was tumah. I knew before that it was kachim. I knew before that it was a mikdash. The low mice and they come. That doesn't bring you to bring a carbon. What makes you bring a carbon is the idea at the end. Right, even though according to the Tanakama you need a yediyah at the beginning and a at the end, but what triggers the carbon is the fact that you knew at the end. You had to know at the beginning too. So he only lists the 1. He says 4 because we're only talking about the 4 that triggers it at the end. That's what triggers it. The 4 at the end is what triggers it, not the 4 at the beginning. That's why he counts it as 4. You really could count it as 6 or as 8, but the fact is we're only counting 4. He says 4 because the latter 4 are what contributes to it. The ones that triggers the carbon, that's what he counts. Some say I'm Rapapa. Rapapa says like this: Olam Tamnav, they're really 8. Ba'arba Kamaisa, the first 4, the lesnum chalator kula, that the rest, all other carbon, like we said, you slept with the wrong person, you ate chaylev, you didn't know that it was chaylev, you didn't have to know anything at the beginning. The 4 things which are not b'chalator kula kachashiv. In other words, he's counting the first ones, not the last ones. The first answer was he counts the last ones because those are the ones which trigger the carbon. Now he says no, he's counting the first ones because those are what is unique about tumas kasha b'kasha. All other karbanos chatos that you bring for a sin is when you knew it at the end. You knew after you did it. You didn't know at the beginning. You knew at the end. That's what triggers it. But here, what also triggers it is the 4 that you had yediyas at the beginning. If you didn't have yediyah at the beginning, you don't bring your carbon of the yard. The latter 4 that apply in all other karbanos chatas throughout the Torah. He doesn't list those, but technically you could count them as 8 if you want to. Let's say he forgot, not that he forgot that he was somebody, he forgot the halachas of tumah. He forgot that the halachas of tumah. What do you say, Mao? Is that considered a helam? He forgot that. What do you forget? If he doesn't know which of the little vermin or which of the little crawling things are tummy or not, is it a sheretz or a tzfardeya? Tzfardeya is not tummy. Pasuk says, Rashi brings down the pasuk, and he says he doesn't kagona tzav. It's a turtle, a lizard. Shedomel tzfardeya. The Savar Shanim Tami maybe he thinks those things are not Tami, doesn't know. Zilka Biravu, let him go to the schoolhouse. I mean, kids learn that in school. They know that a sheretz is metame, a dead sheretz is metame, a dead svardei is not. So what do you mean he doesn't know that? So Lolam de Yara Batuma sheretz. He knows about those sheretz, but the question over here was going to Nogava Kadosha. He touched only a small, tiny section of a dead sheretz, the size of a lentil bean. Kadosha, he doesn't know the Kadosha imitame or lamitame. He doesn't know the halacha. Is if he touched that small amount, is it tamei or not? He doesn't know that. It could be that even a size of a kadosh at the time when it comes to Tuma Sheretz, he didn't know that. Even the other than Matami Sheretz Bohem, since he knows the general idea that a dead Sheretz is Matami Yediahi, is that considered a knowledge? And then he forgot that, and then he either ate kachim or went into the base of Mikdash. Then he remembers that considered Odilma, even the kadosh lo yada, since he doesn't know if a kadosh is Matami or not, he Matami Ilo. Matame Halomi, it's considered not knowing. In other words, he knew that he was Tame, but he doesn't know if the size that he touched is a Tame or not. Is that considered a Helam or not? That's the question. Take it. So we don't have an answer. Boy, Rav Yomi, another question. Ben Bavel Shal Eretz Yisrael. A man came from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, meaning he came from outside of Eretz Yisrael. He never got the guided tour of downtown Jerusalem, of the old city, and he doesn't know where it is. He doesn't know where the base of Mikdash is. He never saw it. He knows that there's a place called the base of Mikdash. He just never saw the place. Right? Mao. Ali B'Daman. Who are we speaking about? Eli Medur B'Kiva. If we're going contra B'Kiva, the boy Yediyah B'Tchila, he says you need a Yediyah at the end, at the beginning Yediyah at the end. Mikdash. We just said in the Mishnah, Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Lezer say that you're only chayiv on forgetting about the Tumah, not if you forgot about the place of the base of Mikdash or not. You're only chayiv on that. If you forgot you were tummy, you went into base. You were tummy. You forgot you were tummy. You went into the base of Mikdash. Okay, you're chayiv there. But if you knew you were tummy, you just didn't know that this was the base of Mikdash, you're not chayiv there. So what are you talking about over here? The question is, according to him, you came from Bavel, you came from outside of, you came from America, New York. You didn't know where the base of Mikdash was. Are you chayiv? What do you mean? You're not chayiv there. You're not chayiv for that. You're only chayiv if you were tummy and you forgot and you went into the base of Mikdash. You're not chayiv if you forgot the base of Mikdash. Or contra Bishmal. Now this is where we get enlightened into Rabbi Shimon Shita. Rabbi Shmuel says, the Machayev al Helam. He says, you are Chayev al Mikdash like the Tanakama. Holo ba Yediyah B'Tchila. He doesn't need a Tchila. We said at the end of the Mishnah, Rabbi Shmuel holds this is like any other, like a Chatas Chelav, that you don't have to know anything at the beginning, just have to know at the end you were Tameh. So what's this idea? If you forgot, if you never knew this was the place of the base Mikdash, who are you asking according? According to Rabbi Kiva, there is no Chiyav of Korban V'Oret on Hela Mikdash at all. And according to Rabbi Shmuel, you didn't have to know about it at the beginning anyway. You'd be chayiv anyway. Hello, boy, as long as you found out that you went to the base of Mikdash while you were tummy, you have to bring a korban. Just like if you found out afterwards that you ate chaylev, you have to bring a korban. So let's reach up. I'll leave it to Rebbe. Goes according to Rebbe, the boy yediyah b'tchila. He says you need a b'tchila. He says you need u'machayav al hela Mikdash. You chayiv there. But Omar, and he said yediyah space Rabo shmo yediyah. Rebbe also we have back on Daf Hay. The Rebbe holds just knowing the halacha. Knowing the halacha is considered knowledge, even if you didn't know you were tummy exactly, you knew just the halacha. Mike, even the Yada Dika Mikdash, well, since he knows there is a base of Mikdash, that he learned, everybody learned there's a base of Mikdash, is that considered a knowledge? And he forgot that. O Dilma, even the Makomale, since he doesn't know, he knew that there was a base of Mikdash. So is that considered a Yediyah? O Dilma, even the Makomale, he didn't know the place of it. Is that considered halama? He says, since he Yada, he didn't really know. In other words, he came into Eretz Yisrael. He knows it's a base of Mikdash, but he doesn't know where it is. Do you say since he knows there's a base of Mikdash, that's considered a Yediyah? And he forgot that now. He forgot now that this was the base of Mikdash, or that he forgot that there was a base of Mikdash. Is that considered a Yediyah that he forgot? According to Rebbe, not according to Rebbe Kiva and according to Rebbe Lezer, Yediyah, Hela Mikdash doesn't mean anything anyway. You don't Hela Mikdash doesn't mean it. It doesn't mean it. You don't have to have Hela Mikdash. All he counts is that you have Helam Tumah. You forgot about the Tumah. Hela Mikdash doesn't mean anything. So according to him, it doesn't count. And according to Rabbi Shmuel, you don't need any Yediyah at the beginning anyway. So if he knew there was a base of Mikdash, he knew there was such thing as a base of Mikdash. That he learned. But he doesn't know this is the base of Mikdash. So what do you say? Do you say, since he knows that there's a base of Mikdash, that's considered a Yediyah? Even the other base Mikdash Ba'olam Yediyah, that's considered a Yediyah. Now he forgot, but he knew there was a base of Mikdash. Or Abim Dis Robert. My kiva the other dika makes problem yediahi. Ultima kiva the kamolayara. It's halama. That's the question over here now, and that's what that was question was raised, and it's not clear. Echnef Lazar, whether you went into the Azar in the old one or you went into the one that was expanded, it was expanded properly. How do you know that you need this whole procedure that we said with the Melech and the Navi and the Ur Matumim, the Kohen Gadol, and the later on they didn't have the Ur Matumim and the Sanhedrin and the two loaves? How do you know you need that whole procedure? Like like everything that I showed you with Hashem said to Moshe Betzalel, like I'm showing you, Eis Tavnis HaMishkan, the structure of the Mishkan, Eis Tavnis Kol Caleb, and the structure, and the way they're all the Caleb. V'chein Tasu L'Dor, V'chein Tasu. Says V'chein Tasu, what does that mean? L'Doros. That Rashi says, the top Rashi, Kroy Yisrael said extra. It didn't have to say V'chein Tasu. It just says, do everything like I told you. And then it says V'chein Tasu. What is that? L'Midrash, L'Doros, to teach me that when you build it in the future, Hashem was showing about the Mishkan. When you build the Batei Mikdash in the future, as Bezrat Hashem, you'll build them. You should follow the same procedure. Kroy Yisrael L'Midrash, L'Doros. We made Moshe, and it was the time of Moshe. The Melech, Moshe was the king, V'Navi, V'Achiv Kohen Gadol, V'Urim V'Tumim, V'Shem Zkanim. He had all that. So you have to do the same thing in the future. Whenever you designate and delineate the boundaries of Yerushalayim or the boundaries of the Beis Mikdash, you have to have that same whole thing. Mosav Rava, Kolkim Shesam Moshe, when all the camel that Moshe made, V'Shichasan Mekachsan, just anointing them with the Shem and the Mishcha is what sanctified them, what consecrated them. Mikan Va'elach, after Moshe's time, Avodasa Mechanchasam, just using them in the service, that's what consecrates them, what dedicates them, inaugurates them into the service of the Beis Hamikdash. Vamai, why do you say that? Nema Chen Tasu L'Doros. Why do you say that? If the Chen Tasu meant you have to do everything the same way that in Moshe's time, both in terms of delineating the boundaries, etc., everything has to be done the same way. So why do you say that the Kelim Moshe did Mishichasam is Kasham? Kan Veilach, the Avodo is Machan Chasam. Why shouldn't you also need the Shem and the Mishra in the future? But my name V'chein Tasu L'Doros. The Shani Osam Mamrekor says Vayim Shechem Vayikadesh Osam, because there by Moshe it says he anointed them and he sanctified them. Osam Mashiach, they have to be sanctified with anointing of the oil. Below L'Doros, but not L'Doros Mashiach. For Doros you don't need the oil. All you need is just using them in the service. That's what inaugurates them, what consecrates them, dedicates them. Maybe it means this. Osam them is b'Mashiach, L'Doros of Mashiach b'Avara. Maybe darshan it this way. Why do you say Osam is Mashiach but not L'Doros? Learn it this way. Ema Osam, the ones that Moshe did, had to be anointed with the oil. L'Doros in the future, Obam Shicha Bavara. Maybe either one works. Why do you say that it doesn't work with Mashiach? Maybe it works either one. Amar Papa, Amar the pasuk says Asher Yishar Subam, that they served them. Yishar Subam Kodesh, that were serviced, meaning you were used in the service in the Kodesh. Talan Kasa B'Sheirus. The pasuk said it depends on servicing. If they were used in the service, then they are sanctified. So Hashka Kasa Rachman Asher Yishar So now that since the pasuk says, you have a pasuk which says what sanctifies them in the future, their servicing, using them in the service is what sanctifies them. Osam lovely. So what do we need osam? Why does it say by Kaddish osam, indicating only in the time of Moshe but not later on? So Yilakas Rachman osam having a minute. I would have thought Hanihu de in Moshe Rabbeinu's time, it was all you needed was anointing. L'Doros Mashicha uva avoda. But for the Doros, you would need what? Both Mashicha and Avoda. And Avoda. Why? Because it says, V'chein ta'asu. So I would think you have to do Mashicha just like Moshe did. And from the Pasuk Vasher Sosavam, you need Avoda. You have to have both. You have to anoint them and service them. The cost of V'chein ta'asu. It says V'chein ta'asu. Do it like Moshe. And Asher Sosavam. Me Rachman Osam. Therefore, Osam comes to tell me, Osam Mashiach, only Moshe is with Mashicha, below the Doros Mashicha. L'Doros, you don't use Mashiach, all you need is servicing. That's all that you need. All right, we'll pick them here tomorrow. Mr. Shem, have a good day, everybody.